Yeah, here we are. All right, cool. It looks like we're streaming everywhere. I'm using the caster to connect everything. So, all right, we got Matt Belair here live. I've been on your show a couple times. We've hung out in the jungle. We've gotten into some weird stuff. And simply, like, if anyone just wants to be impressed, go to Matt's website. Just go to mattbelair.com. And I've been following your stuff for a while now, and just watching your evolution and just all the topics that you cover, and the depth that you get is mind bending for most people. If people listen to my stuff and they go, "Oh man, I like it when you get into the ethereal topics and all that," I was like, "Oh, you love Matt." Yeah, you should be listening to both shows. And we were just talking about, I made a post, was it a few days ago, a throwback post. I squatted 410 for 5.
It's unreal, bro.
Yeah, we're talking, you're talking about like the feeling of getting under a bar with that much weight and repping it out or just one rep. There's something that it's hard to replicate, like what's happening with the nervous system and just all the cascade of effects that happen after that. You were saying that about the back squat, which is what I posted, which is super sexy. People love that shit. But I find the thing that excites my body the most is a stone. If you can pick up a stone, and then if you can load the stone onto something that's about shoulder height, so like it causes you to have to lift all the way up. Oh man, that one excites me.
Well, yeah, man. I think the squat too, it's like there's something primal about your maximum, like the maximum lift, like when you're down on a squat, and it's like there's will involved, and it's you're depending on your body because there's so much friggin' weight, and you got to go, if you want to go to your max, it's always like a little bit more than you think you can do. You're not really sure if you can do it. So there's all these kind of like magical experiences of like pushing yourself to the limit. And I love anything like that. Sprinting is the same way. I kind of gave that suggestion when I did a 21-day challenge, because so many people, like, we live in like sedentary lives, right? We're not moving around. So like, when's the last time you sprinted as fast as you can? When's the last time you yelled as loud as you can? And I appreciate the kind words, man. When I met you right away, it was like in the jungle, and it's just so much fun, man. You're like a guy who just wants to be alive and express himself and test the limits and question a lot of things. And so I just appreciate the kind words and being on your show, man. Every time I chat with you, whether it's a podcast format or especially in real life, that's even way better. It's always a treat.
We're holding back here, folks. We're holding back.
Yes, we are.
Can you give everyone, give my audience a quick little bio, like where you came from and what you're currently up to?
Sure, man. Yeah, I think for me, the easiest way to explain it is I grew up a martial artist. My dad was a martial artist, was really interested in that. And right away, I was taught mind, body, spirit, adding those elements. So at a very young age, I'm watching Kung Fu movies and all this kind of thing, learning from Bruce Lee when I got a little bit older, watching all the Kung Fu movies, kind of teaching myself a lot. As I got older, I got into skateboarding and snowboarding and all of that kind of stuff. But I started researching consciousness and altered states in my teens, very young, because I was meditating and I wanted to see what was possible for me. But I was also exploring the limits of, I'd say the human potential, because I was reading about yogis and Jesus Christ and, astral projection and stuff like that. These Shaolin monks that could do all these amazing things. And all the research showed it had to do with your mind. It wasn't just the body. It was this combination of mind, body, spirit, and all of that was important. So when I finished college, not graduated, when I was finished college, I moved out to the mountains because I wanted to go snowboarding. And so I became a professional snowboard coach and did that for about 8 years in Whistler, but all researching things on peak performance, mindset, consciousness, stuff like that. And then it got to a point where I wanted to travel, and I always wanted to travel and put myself in the scenarios around the best in the world. So if I wanted to get super strong and learn about fitness, my butt would be down at the strong coach. what I mean? I'd be learning about the psychology, the strength, and just recognizing somebody who's a master around all these other people who have immersed themselves in the field. You get exponentially better by doing that. And that's probably the smartest thing I've ever done in my life, is put myself in the best environments. For snowboarding, that made me a great snowboarder. The podcast, talking to amazing people, traveling the world, things like that. So, the most amazing people I've ever seen are Shaolin monks. So I went to Nepal because I wanted to be enlightened, and I meditated with Tibetan monks. Couldn't go to Tibet because it's still occupied by China. It's a whole bag of worms in itself over there. And then I went to Shaolin Academy in China, where one of the masters could break stone with two friggin' fingers, actually for real. And it was one of the most extraordinary experiences. And so, I've been to Egypt with the Resonant Science Foundation, almost 30 countries, really just exploring human potential, human history, and what the actual flying F-bomb is going on here, and the limits of my own potential, but also transforming humanity. Because when I look at the world, it's really, there's a lot of issues, right? We've got famine,
Yeah.
we've got poverty, we've got coronavirus, we've got violence, we've got ignorance, we've got arrogance, and we've got all of this kind of thing. And it seems like there's a massive upgrade available for myself as an individual, but also as a collective, to cooperate, to communicate, to make it a planet where if we had extraterrestrial visitors, we would be proud of it, right? Can you imagine an ET coming down and having to explain to them what was going on? They'd be like, what are you guys doing? Like, how can you have such high intelligence over here, but such low morality and ethics and conduct over here? You use your intelligence to create mass war, to create chaos. And so I feel like there's a lot of ways that we can upgrade ourselves and our communities in the planet.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. You've done what very few people have done, and like you went all the way, in a way, right? Well, we won't say all the way, because I mean, if you went all the way, maybe you'd still be sitting under a tree meditating.
Oh God, that's almost happened. I should really try to get in there.
So the thing is so many people, they hit me up on Instagram, and they uh like they want to know what book to read or what course to take or whatever it may be. And they want to sit in the comfort of their own home and they want to learn. But you and I both know that the best way to learn is you got to go in person. Like, there is nothing replaces what's in person. And I know that for traveling the world and conducting interviews in person, like we have very similar paths, in that there was something that I didn't realize until I had already was in the midst of it, where I'm finding the people who are the best at what they do and then spending the day with them, like doing it. There's this whole idea is, when you read a book, you might learn the methods or the principles of a thing, right? And we pat ourselves on the back for learning these things. Like, I know I can talk about this principle, but when you get in the presence of somebody who has truly mastered something, there's something that it transcends the words. There's something that there's their way of being is what's actually happening there. And they're doing the best they can with their words, but it's being in their energy makes a huge difference, I've found. And I was listening to I was reading up on you're gonna I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this. I was reading about magic last week and symbols, and there was this conversation about things being passed down from person to person, whereas like the book, even if you have access to these symbols and you have access to these ideas, that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. That's really good. But if you can sit and be in the presence of a master, that's where the real transmission happens. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, man, it's a fantastic insight. And There's a lot of information out there about why that is. That's why CrossFit is so successful and why people improve so quickly is because when you go to the gym and you do one of those workouts right by yourself, it's less motivating. But when you see like your buddy doing it and he's just crushing it and you're like, I'm stronger than that guy, then you start crushing it more, right? And you start to improve yourself. And that's one of the fundamentals of martial arts is iron sharpens iron. So the more that guy masters himself and practices, he practices 8 hours a day and you're doing two, all of a sudden you see the potential of what's available, but you know that he earned it and you watch the process. You realize there are no tricks. And, because I do a lot in psychology, sports psychology, flow state, one of the biggest misconceptions that pisses me off is that, part of it is a mindset. I can go and say someone's going to do downhill skiing because I have a, extreme sports background, or they're going to try to do something impossible. Can help them, shift their mindset and get prepared. But really, the key is process and earning flow state. By the time you get to that point, you've either earned it or not. You know what I mean? And so when you earn it and then add those mental tools, you're really competing at the highest level possible. People kind of ignore that. But on the flip side, when we're looking at flow state and like, it's like, Mike, how do I squat 400? Well, you know what I mean? That was a lot of squats. That was a lot of days. That was a lot of different training protocols. That was a lot of learning, right? And you could shorten that curve immensely with all
Yeah.
of your knowledge, but it wouldn't take away the work that they would need to do, right? And so
Right.
that's that kind of middle ground. So when we are in the presence of somebody who really has knowledge, one thing we know for sure are mirror neurons. And so when you're watching it, those mirror neurons are firing and you're learning at an accelerated rate, beyond any other magical stuff that we might not understand yet. Like in yoga and yogis, I think it's called transference. You see the yogi, and they tap your head and then they can gift you enlightenment. But like I said, even on a basic level of understanding, mirror neurons, and just like the 4 minute mile, for example, people thought it was impossible. Somebody did it and it just broke that limit of belief and capability. And I feel like being around other masters, it forces you to accelerate. And there's got to be all this energetic, intuitive type of thing that happens. But even just basic, common sense. If you go, anything that you compete in, the better they are, the more quicker you're going to adapt to that. And as far as like magic and alchemy goes, it's a very fascinating thing because even alchemy, if you go to the origins, it's actually alchemizing consciousness and emotion to get to higher states of awareness, as well as metals and science and things like that. And so we live in a very fascinating world, and the people we surround ourselves with are so important, especially in critical times, because you want to know who's actually supporting you. We live in this world of masks, you know what I mean? And your community and your family and what people stand for are very important. And we live in a society that is very competitive, very undermining, very immature. And so if you can find a good community, that is such an empowering thing to have, especially in times like these.
Yeah, speaking of times like these, the ability to go spend time in physical space with, yeah, I hope that when people have access to travel and be in person, we take more advantage of it. I hope this was a wake up call because people can't, and I think people are going to be timid when it comes to things like eating in restaurants and traveling on airplanes and all that after this. But to that point, what we're doing right now, the Zoom call, I'm getting to see you. So I'm getting some motor neuron action. It's not three-dimensional. Um, is that transference or however you call it, is that still happening? Or is it happening on one level, but not the same as in person? Is it good enough?
So that's a great question. Well, I think in person is always the best scenario for sure. And video is even better because we know that 90% of communication is nonverbal. You pick up a lot. And so now when I'm going through information, and probably the last 3 weeks, my eyes are literally sore from just demolishing information, trying to figure out what is going on here. And, when I can see a person, so there's this video that just came out, Plandemic, featuring Dr. Judy Mikovits, and
Yeah.
somebody another doctor said, oh, this is baloney. So I look at both sides,
Was you
right?
looking at? Did you see what Z Dog said?
That was the guy. So I just did a
Yeah,
post about. I
I
just did a
I,
post about it.
I love Z Dog. I met him in Boulder a while back, years and years ago, and then ever since then I've been following him. So
Yeah. So you know,
he's a very common sense. He's a very like no shit common sense kind of guy.
Yeah. So well, I just did this thing though, but it was like, so it's him, and it wasn't for him. I was like, look, like there's a Dr. Judy. She could be full of nonsense. I just want to know the truth. But she
Yeah.
does a panel with Bruce Lipton and Dr. Rashid Buttar, who Dr. Rashid Buttar was also former military special forces, and Dr. Bruce Lipton has a lifetime of trying to help people. And the way that he did it was very condescending. And I just said, like, look, I don't know who's right. I just know that when we're looking at like people's face and the information and how they deliver it and that integrity and energy, that's also important, especially when it comes around critical things. And so we need to be looking at all of these different elements when we're getting information, especially at times like this, because nobody really knows what's going on and what's the intent behind it. And so if we're looking at getting as much information as we can, information is by far the best. Video is even better, but we want to see the face. And the last thing I wanted to say is, in Buddhism, they'll talk about mental nutriments. So what are you ingesting? You know, are you looking up all this information on better health, how to create a business, how to support your community, whatever that case is? That's the most important thing. What are the subject matter that you're reading, and allow opposing views, but really dive deep into what's important. And that's for me, when I go down the rabbit holes, I try not to be too combative and, stay down there too long, because it's not always helpful for my life. But in times like this, I really want to know what's going on, and try to find the right information that I can help empower someone, right? Not just scare the crap out of them, because I've worked on projects that are forced organ harvesting in China. They've for 20 years or so, they've been targeting Falun Dafa, which is basically meditators. You can be in the park meditating, right? It's the Strong Coach meditation group. The Chinese government comes, they put you in jail. Once you're in jail, you have no rights. And then they kill them and take their organs. And when I first found this out, I was like, you're kidding me. Yeah. Right. You're just finding this out.
I've never heard of this.
I didn't hear about it either till a couple years ago. And that's the exact reaction I had. And I said, show me the information. And then this guy, he's been on my podcast. His name's Nick Janicki. Really great guy. Float tanks. What is this? True Rest float tanks. He's that guy. And have you ever seen what is that show? There's a ballet show that goes around the world, that premieres all the time. I guarantee you've seen a poster for it. I went to go see that. That's the story of that show, of what's happening in China. So hundreds of thousands every year. And I couldn't believe it. And then I went through all those documents and information, and was like, whoa, that's dark. How do you share with people really dark stuff, but also find a solution? Same with like human trafficking, right? So I don't want to stay down those rabbit holes too long, because it's super depressing. I want to figure out what's actually happening, and then how can I spend 90% of my time building the solution, sharing information with people that will actually empower them, their own lives, improve the quality of their own family, the relationships with themselves, relationship with other, and hopefully inspire compassion and kindness, so that we begin to work together and we kind of separate these differences, not be so polarizing.
Man, I have so many questions off of what you just said. So thinking about one of the things I've been very conscious of is what goes in, right? I notice, one of the things I've noticed is normally my day-to-day, there's a lot of novelty. So it's actually, I didn't realize how difficult of a time I was having tracking my internal state from day to day. And now that I've been in a very solid routine for about 6 weeks now, and I haven't had this much consistency in years. I'm around the same exact people every day, the same exact 2 people. I talk to my team. There's 10 people on the Strong Coach team that I talk to every week. And then there's a handful of clients I talk to. But my mornings are the same. Everything's the same. So I'm noticing my internal state more, and I'm noticing my thoughts more. And I'm noticing that, what did I watch on TV last night? What was the last thing I read on Instagram? What was what did I consume? And then how did I wake up in the morning? Was I rested? What were the first thoughts in my head when I woke up in the morning? What was my motivation like? How do I feel about myself? How do I feel about the world? Is it helpful? And so I found I actually stopped consuming a lot of content. What's funny is before this whole pandemic hit, I you may have said I had blinders on. It's like, look, I'm focused on my clients. I'm focused on what I can impact. I'm not worried about what's going on in the rest of the world. This happens. Fucking tidal wave comes in. Obviously, all this stuff that's outside of my control is impacting what's going on. And so I start researching, and so like I've gone back to I don't know what I can impact, but I'm also open to a whole new level of conversation happening in the world that I am remaining skeptical on all sides. Because there was a few moments where I was like, oh, I felt like they got me. I was like, oh shit, I need to hide. This thing is really going to hurt people. And then the data rolls in. It's like, well, the data's questionable. And then more data's questionable. And then I start finding out things like what you're talking about in China, and then the war that's happening between the United States and China. That's uh there's cyber attacks, and there's like all this stuff that's not conventional, what we think of as conventional warfare going on. So how do you and here's the thing is I've had friends bring to me this dark shit that's happening in the world. And then if you research far enough, it's like, yeah, it's happening. And then you have like an Epstein thing happen, and everyone thought that all that was bullshit. And then everybody goes, well, something's going on there. But most people just want to put their head back in the sand. Um, what do we do with this information, this stuff that pops up that's really dark? Because usually my experience of it is when people start talking about it, 95% of the crowd just like puts their head down, doesn't want to look at it. Yeah, I mean, how do you approach all this information and remain clean?
That's a really great question. And I've been constantly considering that, especially over the last little while. I've known about a lot of this stuff for a long time. And the reason was when I was a kid, I was curious how we had war and starvation. It made no sense to me. So I started researching and researching. And then I basically, went down all the rabbit holes. I went down, found like, oh, Illuminati, stuff like that. Well, when you say Illuminati, you might just say like the corporatocracy or kings and queens of the past. Back in the day, you'd be like, they're in a castle. They're in a castle. We're not in a castle. It's very different. And so you've got these, global institutions, international bankers, people that go beyond the government, military, and industrial complex, all that kind of stuff. And so the first realization is like, whoa, the government and the world is not working for me. It's a huge realization. And it's funny because for some people anyway, because why would the government be against you? You know what I mean? It makes no sense. At first you think that they're trying to help you. Then you kind of go down that rabbit hole. And it's interesting because I've been posting a lot more of the dark stuff lately. I never really did before because it's not that helpful sometimes. The people that are responding and saying, Matt, please keep posting this, they figured it out through some sort of avenue. And I don't care which one you choose. If you go all the way down, you're going to figure out something isn't right. Like food, for example, you get really sick, you start studying food. You're going to be like, why did they do that on purpose? You start studying psychology in schools. You're like, why do they do this on purpose? And so when you begin to investigate all those things, you start to realize some things aren't so benevolent for the masses, right? And it can get pretty dark, and I don't want to go full like all the way down the rabbit hole because it's super dark. Like when I found out about human trafficking, just like when I found out about the organ harvesting, I was like, oh my God, human trafficking, 200 to 400 million people, they estimate, low estimates 200 million. This is slavery, human trafficking, and awful conditions, pedophilia, all that kind of stuff's coming out. When you continue to research it, like you look at Out of Shadows and things like that, you realize it's organized. And it took me a couple years.
And
of
by the
research.
way, if anyone is skeptical about what Matt's saying right now, I have met the people running the nonprofits that are housing these these kids that are being trafficked.
Mm.
There's not enough housing, there's not enough funding, and there's also nonprofits set up to rescue these kids. So
Yeah.
this is very, very real. It's not common conversation. Usually when people start finding out about this, this is one of those conversations where there's enough overt evidence where you're like, okay, it's like all I gotta do is introduce you to a couple people and you go, oh shit, this human trafficking thing is very real.
Yeah, yeah, and we don't want to deal with that in our lives, you know what I mean? We want to go about our day, we want to go about our job, we want to think about our own world. And again, I really contemplate all this stuff because I feel like that's how we have 9.1 million people die each year of starvation, of hunger related illnesses across the planet. I hope that this pandemic gives us an opportunity to extend our compassion to all of the different parts of the world. But things like media being owned, psychological manipulations. If people want to look at a great documentary, check out The Century of Self. And this is how people in power and that run the media understand very, very well to a science how people operate, not just as individuals, but as groups. And so when you start looking at all these things, you're like, holy smokes, like this is actually for real. And you start to view the world in a little bit of a different way. And so if we understand that 200 million people are in human trafficking, if we understand that people are dying of starvation each year, I think the first thing is becoming aware of the truth. Some people are calling this the Great Awakening, right? And then all of a sudden, Out of Shadows has like 11 million views. And then you start seeing stuff you've never seen before. When I started going down, every time I would just continue researching, I would go, there's no way it could be this dark. There's no way. And I'm like by myself at like 18. I was like, there's no way it could be this dark. There's no way it could be this dark. And over my life, meeting all only certain people who wanted to talk about it. Right. And in my travels to 30 countries, I've talked to very powerful people in different situations, doing what they can in different organizations and capacities to try to find solutions for these things. But they're so entrenched. A lot of them are ancient and incredibly powerful. It's very sophisticated. And so what do? I feel like the first thing is awareness of having the courage to get out of the sand, to just look at some of the things in the world that we are a part of complicitly by ignoring it. It's like, that's why I struggle with this. Like, you could look at like Martin Luther King, if he just sat back and was like, oh, I'm not going to really address this. And everybody was like, I'm not going to address it. Well, they had to address it because they were getting suppressed, right?
Right.
They had no rights. And so when we're looking at something and we're in a fine scenario and we have our food, we have our shelter, we have our family, we have our thing, but we're not extending the compassion to people who might be starving to death, to people who are having their organs forcibly taken from their body, to people in human trafficking, in situations. And honestly, man, the sickness and the darkness to it'll cripple any sane person, and that's why people don't want to look at it. Like even my partner and my mom and my aunt are starting to look a little this now, and they're like, we can't handle this. But if we don't look at these things, we can't find a solution together. We can't wake up as a global humanity to say, you know what? Yes, we're good now, but let's now make sure that these people are good. Let's put in new systems and new information, new collectives, new agreements to make sure that all people are taken care of. And I've done a lot of studying with, a couple indigenous teachers, and one of them, Clifford Mahudi, he came on the podcast talking about, he's like, this is an important time for me to share some of the Hopi stuff that, I've been holding back a little bit. And his message was so simple. He's like, what I was taught and all the spiritual teachings that I was taught and researched over the years. And he was an environmental engineer and civil engineer, very smart. And he goes, I was taught respect for the land, respect for myself, respect for my friends and elders, respect for my community, respect for the environment, like just all of this stuff. And I look at the way the world's run, and we're not doing that. And so another way I think about it is I think about that spiritual, I don't know if it's spiritual bypass, but I think about it because one form of thought says it's your own consciousness, right? So if I'm
Yeah.
looking at these things that's dark, right, and I'm thinking about it, then I'm bringing it into my life. But if I only project what I want in this hologram, maybe that's true. Maybe I just filter it in and I just create Matt's world, and that's that's everything. But if I understand that there's something in the world that could really need help, and I don't extend my compassion to that with action, then I can't be a part of the solution. And so that's where I'm kind of at with it, that I feel like we just need a little bit of action on a global scale. The first part is going to be awareness and be like, oh my God. And then just a few people be like, hey man, let's focus on this a little bit. And I think we can create solutions that way. So I think the participation is necessary.
Yeah, I imagine that there's it's very difficult to reach outside of yourself to help others until you feel safe, right? So I imagine that a part of me, for instance, me feeling like I can go out and make a difference. If I don't feel safe, if there's not enough money in my bank account, if there's not, if the future is uncertain, and I say money in the bank account because when I talk to most people, that's where their attention is at. It's like, the world's so uncertain. I'm like, what actually is uncertain? Well, my paycheck. He's like, okay, that's what's uncertain. So I imagine that it's a mix of people not feeling safe enough to get outside of themselves, to take action, to take care of other people is part of it. Even if someone's making a six-figure income, uh, there's something inside of humans that want safety, and then there's like all this made up shit that we create, all these stories we tell ourselves that bring up fear, right? That we need to keep looking out for ourselves. So it's hard to reach outside of ourselves. And the other thing is, this past weekend, I was meditating on Saturday morning, and just it's like I had flashes of different scenes of people who they're angry because they can't get back to work yet, and they want to feed their families, and they are afraid that they're not going to have enough money. I had flashes of people that were like suffocating to death and dying, and there was just flashes of like all this pain around the world, and there was a lot of compassion and also gratitude, not about myself, but just gratitude for the planet as a whole. And I really didn't get shit done on Saturday, right? I was feeling all the feelings and having compassion. I got it done on Sunday, in regard to work, but it's like on one side, do I feel safe enough to help other people outside of myself? And then on the other side is feeling everything that's happening in the world, and having that level of empathy can be debilitating. Like having all those feels can be debilitating. How do you mesh that, or is that something you're working on?
Yeah, that's a really great commentary. The one thing I wanted to share going back a little bit was I think it's about balance, because consuming some of this information, figuring out what's going on in the world is very challenging. Part of our own self-care needs to be some sort of meditation or internal practice to know the voice that you're listening to have your own integrity, physical, mental, emotional, just something. And I think that a lot of people don't get that. And so moving to the second, or what you just addressed there, we were living in a society that is kind of monotonous. It's robotic. People they can go through a week, a month, a year, or a whole lifetime never really thinking of anything outside of that paycheck, everything outside of that security that they believe they have. This is giving us all an opportunity to reflect on who we are and what we're doing, and also level that playing ground. You've been to Burning Man before, and you know that wealth doesn't matter there. You know that the playa at some point is going to take that, arrogant person, and it's going to leave them naked in the dust, afraid of everything, relying on another person for something as simple as water. And
Yeah.
so I feel like a lot of the world, like,
Sounds like that was experience.
I've heard it. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh man. So in our world, I feel like because Canada, North America, and Europe, we don't have these problems that so much of the other world is experiencing, we're not extending that compassion. And so almost it's like that wake up call for all of us, because we're getting down to that. We're experiencing what that is like. And it's an uncomfortable feeling. It's unsafe. And so what do you need? You need community. You need good people. You're looking around who you can trust, but all the media and the propaganda, it's like I'm living in all those dystopian movies all at once. And, could definitely go down the rabbit hole of like the documentaries and the things that I've been looking at. But it does look like there is a bit of an agenda here, but I feel like the people will wake up enough to say, hey, this isn't right. But what's happening is we're becoming afraid of each other. We need touch, we need hugs, we need community, we need friends. People are not viruses. We have strong immune systems. If you look at the death rates coming out, any of the data, every country now is coming out and saying, hey, this is way, way less than the CDC and all the World Health Organization is saying. Then you investigate the World Health Organization, and then you follow the money trail between Bill Gates. Everybody's giving Bill Gates crap. Well, because his hands are in everything. They're in they're in Gavi in Canada with lobbying. They're in the IHME statistics and World Health Organizations, all of it. So you just need to question if there's a financial interest. And I just had David Martin on, the guy is like so next level. I don't even really know what he does or what he's talking about, but I was lucky to have him on the show. And he's got like this system of information. When a global catastrophe happens, it just creates all this information. And one of the things that he did was the king of Liechtenstein or something, the prince of Liechtenstein, was going to patent basmati rice. And he stopped it because his web of information or something picked it up and literally went over there and stopped it. Like, the guy's a badass. And so when you just are looking at the information of what's happening as far as the systems on the planet go, that's when we, the people, need to figure out what these systems are based on and what values and ethics and direction we want them to go in. Because if you look at our financial system, it just rewards, the bottom line. It just rewards money. It doesn't reward sustainability. It doesn't reward ethics. It doesn't, to a degree it does, but really the bottom line is always money. And
Well,
so
it's short. It's not just money. It's short term.
Yeah.
It's quarterly earnings. It's things like that. If there was more of a view on, if there was a 10-year, if we're measuring in decades, I bet a lot of the ethical and sustain. I mean, it handles a lot of that. So when I look at systems, I go, well, what's the one thing we could do that would make some of this other stuff even unnecessary? I mean, but how do you do a 10-year,
Yeah, but
reward
those
or
are
something
good.
like that?
Those are good questions, because there's nothing wrong with capitalism, nothing wrong with income, right? As if we're providing a value, but we want to look at the impact it's having everywhere. And so that's why this is a thing with China. And again, when you get down the rabbit hole, you kind of notice that, because all the industry is out of China, which is infecting the USA and their decision making. When we worked on the organ, so if you speak out about the organ harvesting in China, you get blacklisted. That means you can't do any business in China. We got to the point where we were going to set up a festival in California. We got it all done. We had the land. We put a down payment on it, and not me personally, but the group did, and we were all set to go. Then they figured out somebody who was a person connected to something, figured out what was for it and shut it all down. Said, nah, you can't do that concert here. And we were at the last step, because it was going to be called a festival called Blacklisted. And it was going to bring attention to what is going on in China, because people like you, the good people of California, you hippies, you're out there enjoying life. But yeah, it's dark, but like when you have that awareness, right? Maybe a few people just go, boom, okay, what could we do? And that's that question. What is the highest level narrative for our organization, system, and humanity as a whole? What's the highest narrative we could have as a planet? What's the highest expression a human could have? What do we need? Clifford Mahudi, the Zuni elder, also talked about greed. We've kind of just gone so far on the spectrum of material wealth in the West. And again, not bad. It's just going through the system that we had, right? And we also valued that, and it became a lot of people's identity. And you weren't good enough or cool if you had a crappy car or whatever the case is. And so, that was just kind of designed. And so now it feels like we just need a little bit of reset. What do we need to live an extraordinary life? If I had a hut, now I have a daughter, so I need an extra room, but a hut, a great workout set, good nature, community, the ability to go snowboarding. That for me would be amazing. Everything else on top of that is a bonus. And so I think that the question is the most important thing, and having people start to imagine, because before this coronavirus thing, everyone's running their patterns, trying to go get something, trying to get more money, trying to get more of this. And now we're kind of reflecting on everything. So what can we do to begin thinking about very empowering questions that will empower ourselves to live an extraordinary life, but also extend that compassion and ability for everyone else on the planet?
Yeah. What do you think in regard to waking up? I'm definitely witnessing a lot of people starting to ask questions that were unpopular even a few weeks ago. So I asked some unpopular questions a few weeks ago on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, caught some shit.
What was the question? I'm getting crap all over the place.
No, I asked one question, which was all right, I just said, okay, these are the numbers for the number of deaths by certain things, car accidents, flu, all this stuff. I was like, okay. And I just I reshared a post where that someone was addressing that. I was like, okay, so who benefits from, what could this be a distraction? Even here's the thing is I wasn't saying that COVID-19 is not even real. But people assumed that I was questioning whether it was real or not. That's like where everyone's mind went. It was like, oh, he's questioning whether people are actually dying. I'm like, look, I didn't say nobody's dying from this. What I'm saying is who's benefiting and what is this a distraction from? Because it's not killing that many people. It's killing people who weren't going to die right now anyway. I get that. It's scary. But is it really worth what the entire world is doing? We didn't shut down interstate travel because people die in car accidents so frequently. But we stop people from going from work. And these are apples and oranges. I get that. So I want to acknowledge that for people who are listening, like, oh, they're not the same thing because you can catch this. And totally, I get why we're doing what we're doing, all that kind of stuff. And it could be even worse. Let's just assume that it's worse than what the data is showing. Let's just say that it's still what's going on. The world is still turning. The economy is still going. Legislation is still being passed. Banks are still banking. What are we being distracted from? And so I just posed a simple question of that. And I don't think anyone even addressed the actual question. It was more caught up in whether this or that. And what I'm witnessing is, and I was like, I stopped asking questions at that point. I'm like, I don't even know if it's worth poking bears right now. And what I've witnessed in the last week is other people who were quiet are now starting to go, well, what about this? I didn't get that. Or I think people have had enough time to put out certain media. Like Plandemic was one of them. I haven't watched it at all. All I've heard is, it's kind of like every documentary has like some points and, it's a story that someone's created. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that real quick, because that's how I got into it with your buddy there. So I called him out. So we'll see how it goes. So my apologies, man. I didn't mean anything by it, but I'm trying to set up a debate between him and Judy. I want to see that because I don't know. I said in the thing, I'm too stupid to know if she's full of crap or not. Right.
Well, he's not my buddy. It's just a guy.
Okay.
Man. No. I think, but I think he was overly dismissive.
Yeah, and he
right.
did it in an unkind way, because that's what I didn't like about it. You know what I mean? And but also I probably wasn't the greatest, because he has a lot of. I googled his pictures and all of them are wearing like, I don't know what he's doing. He's all dressed up, so I'm like, that's the picture you want. Like, so I'm looking at these things. Okay, let's first talk about the formula for truth. Okay, the formula for truth is something I learned by Corey Herter. It's very fantastic. I love it. Imagine you've got the X and Y axis, right? And so, over here, you've got flat Earth, and over here, you've got round Earth. Over here, you have COVID-19 is the deadliest thing you've ever seen in the entire world, and we're all going to die immediately. And here is, it's not even real. It's all conspiracy, okay?
Yeah.
When you are talking to somebody, engaging, whether it's an article, a video, a point of view, whatever, if you just dismiss what they say immediately, you are going to be missing on, if 45 degrees is in the middle and say round earth is over here and flat earth is like this or whatever, when you listen to them all the way out, you're going to find a piece of information that you might not have even heard before by just hearing them out, because there's going to be a portion of truth in all of it. And then when we open up the gauge of all information by everyone, what happens is the information with weight, the truth, starts to make more sense. It makes common sense. And then so you question then the other side. Oh, could there be an agenda? And I even in the last 3 weeks, when I sent those things out like you did, questioning, only a couple people questioned, and they said, you know, why are you using your platform for this? And I was like, I've been questioning this my whole life. This is something I've just been very curious about. Most people don't. And these are just the things that I'm learning. Look at the information and let me know if you can find better information that will make me revise my opinion. I'm all for that. But after going through all of this information, this is the best that I can see of what's going on. And so we're so conditioned not to question in our society. We're so there's a study called the Milgram, I think it's Milgram experiment. And what they do is the test on authority. You ever hear about that one? Where a guy in a lab coat tells you that you're shocking someone on the other
Oh
side,
yeah.
and you can hear
Oh
them
yeah.
scream. And
Dude,
it's
that's
like
such a
80,
good study.
90%, 80 to 90% end up killing that person, because what they do is they have the onus of responsibility on someone else. Well, if you look at our history as
Well,
a
can you
humanity,
review that study real quick? Like give people a rundown if you want me to, I can, but if you want
yeah.
to like
So basically what they did is they had a they brought a person, this all right, they bring the guy into the room, and they say, hey, there's a person in another room, you're going to administer shocks to him. This guy's the person telling them is in a lab coat. He looks like a scientist or some sort of authority figure.
he's in charge.
He's in charge. Yep. So on the other side of the room, the guy can hear the person screaming. And over time, the person in charge tells them, we're going to increase the voltage, and just keeps telling them to shocking. That's his job. And increasingly with the shock, you hear the guy say, scream, stop, no, you know, you're killing me, all this. And the person, because the guy's in charge, will continue to shock them to an extraordinary degree. A lot of time they say, you know, the amount of shocks that the person would have given would have actually killed the human being.
Yeah.
You want to add anything to that?
Yeah. So I mean, basically the premise being, people will people think they're good, right? People are like, oh, I'm a good person. I would never like people judge like Nazi Germany, and I think I heard a correlation between that study and Nazi soldiers killing people, and the way that they were able to justify it is, well, the authority told me to gas those people or whatever it was, and so uh, you've got this people are running around with this idea that I would do it different. If I was in Nazi Germany, I wouldn't have done that. I was like, oh yeah, right. Yeah. You'd be the big one that would stand up and say no. But when you look at the average person in these studies, find out real quick that no, people pretty much do what they're told.
Yes, and that's one of the main things what was so curious. How did Hitler do that? And I studied psychological manipulations. There's an excellent documentary I highly recommend. If you watch Century of Self, it is that bad. It is actually that bad. Then watch Century of Self. What did I say? Out of Shadows? Out of Shadows, then
Uh,
Century of Self.
okay, Out of Shadows, then Century of Self.
Because Century of Self is about Edward Bernays, who is Sigmund Freud's nephew. And Sigmund Freud gave him his book, Unconscious Motivators, when he was like 21 or something. And so they were looking at how they can manipulate the masses of people. and do it with such a degree of excellence. They've been studying this stuff for a long time, and our media is basically owned. And yes, it does sound like a conspiracy theory, but you can actually find so much evidence for it. Really. And when you study, like I studied hypnosis and language patterns, one of the best language patterns or forms of hypnosis is simply repetition. And so people believe that, and the people of Germany that did those things, they were good people. That's how they manipulate you to think that you're doing something good. It's always some sort of manipulation. And a lot of people that research this, a lot of
Yeah,
the
they didn't
doctors that
believe
are,
they were doing something bad. They're not like, oh, I'm being evil. I love
yeah,
being evil. It's not
yeah,
a fucking comic book
yes, yeah,
villain,
yeah, they're
you
good
know?
people thinking they're doing good things under the guise of nationalism, under the guise of whatever sort of thing. And so what we have happening now is that, you just questioned, right? And you get slammed by everybody else. I got slammed by a few people, but I'm looking for the truth. I want to know what the truth is. And I'm seeing the same tactics being used right now. And these tactics are ancient. If you look at the history books, when have we ever been peaceful? When has it ever been like, wow, that government really saved its people? You know what I mean? Like it's really right. It's always been like, it's probably wise to question your government and what
It's
is
usually
going
like
on.
a rogue group saves
Right.
people from, yeah, I got it. Yeah.
Right. And so
That's
if
a
you
good
look
point.
at the increase of censorship and the erosion of rights and the direction things are going and the power, and you talk about the deep state, things like that, all that information is out there. And unfortunately is very real. But again, I do like, if you go down that rabbit hole, I've been down it, it's super dark. There's just evidence that is, it's just all there. Even if you look up, check out the Rockefeller document, the document for future scenarios, Rockefeller future scenarios, and look at lockstep. It's exactly what we're in right now. And, again, the evidence is overwhelming, but what I hope it's doing is asking these questions like you're asking, but we need people to kind of stand up. And one of the things I was actually talking to my partner about yesterday was I felt a little bit sad that a lot of influencers that we have out there, these people that have these great platforms, either A, they're not looking into it and they don't know what's going on. B, they know what's going on and they don't have the courage to say something, right? Like for you, you're a good dude, you got a platform, but you're not sure, you're not going all the way down the rabbit hole to know for sure, because you kind of like put out a feeler and then everybody's clubbing you down because you're questioning something, right? That's what happens. That's why it's frightening. Whether you're an individual and you don't have a platform, it's super frightening. But if you have a bigger platform like Kelly Brogan, she is absolutely brilliant. This woman is brilliant. And she started posting this stuff about Bill Gates and all this stuff because it's documented, verified, checked times 10 information of we should be aware of this. She's getting clubbed by, 20% of her audience, but she had the courage to stand up. So some of these other influencers, if they know what's going on, they're too afraid to speak up, but we need people to speak up now for what their truth is, whether it's right or wrong, so we can get closer to the truth. Like, that guy, the doctor that I just kind of called out a little bit in a conversation, he probably dummied me, but I'd be like, hey man, I'd like you to talk to my friend, Dr. Bear Lando, who's been on the podcast. And I want to watch you two talk, because then I'm going to know who the truth is. Just like, I go back to kind of martial arts. If you and I want to duke it out, we're going to know who's better. It's very physical. It's like, I
Yeah.
understand that. Like you can talk all this crap, but we're going to duke it out. Right. When you watch somebody have an argument or a debate, and you watch one tactic kind of take the conversation and bury it, that the other person is probably more correct. And so I'm just
Yeah.
hoping that more people start to research this. I don't want to name names, but I've thought about it. I thought about making a post and naming like certain names, because I'm like, why are you not saying anything?
Yeah.
You either not looking at this and you should, or B, you have and you're too afraid of what will happen if you say something. But I'm concerned with
Well,
or C, I'm wrong. C is I have no idea what's going on, which is totally valid too.
I'm disappointed and a big part of my thing was I was actually the post I'm referring to. I was just disappointed in the conversation. It's like I make one post and then it's like everything went off into this other tangent, and until that tangent gets addressed, and so it's like I'm sitting here, 15 people respond, then I got to go respond to each person, then they're going to go think about it and they're going to come back and respond. And so for me, it was more around like frustration of like, am I going to dedicate all my time to trying to convince people that they should be questioning such things, or they shouldn't worry about that, and maybe they should look at this? And so for me, it's more of like, is more of the discontent with the forum, with
Well, you,
Facebook comments. Like, I don't want to get into a fucking Facebook comment war. What I want to do is what we're doing right now, which is, let's just have a conversation. People can tune in, they can comment, and we can get in there and talk about it. Because so many things that I know about myself is I'll put something out, but it's not a complete, there's so much context that's missing that we get to have. Oh, you heard what I said, now you respond, and we go back and forth, and like we build this huge context of where we're discussing these ideas inside of. But what happens a lot of times when things are being posted to Facebook is, here, I'm going to post these words, you're going to get triggered and post something, and then it's going to trigger me, and then I'm going to have to sit with this, and it doesn't seem very productive.
well, you're so absolutely correct on that, because it was probably about 3 weeks before I did it. And I had a lot of private conversations with a couple doctor friends, researchers and things like that before I started actually posting my views, because they're the alternative side, And so it took a bit. And every single time I engaged in somebody that said, this is baloney, 100% of the time, whether it was my friend on Facebook or whatever, it was not a productive conversation. That type of individual is not interested in having that type of conversation. And when I say that, I'm not saying everyone, I'm just saying from my experience on the Facebook, when we're trying to create a dialogue, we can talk about information. I had good friends do the same thing, a very few, smaller number, that discussed the topics. They didn't agree, but we had a conversation about the topics. It became fruitful. We both got more information. It wasn't combative. It was a style of information. And so when someone's experiencing cognitive dissonance, and cognitive dissonance is a condition when somebody presents a piece of information that does not fit into your worldview. So one of those examples would be when people found out that the Catholic Church was committing pedophilia on a mass scale. All of the Catholic Church could not believe that, right? You would be ridiculed, you get in trouble, you get all this kind of stuff that happened. Turns out that was actually happening. Turns out it might be even more evil and shockingly disturbing than you could possibly imagine. That might be part of what we're waking up to. The stuff on this planet that sucks is really dark. And so
what is it about people, like, we can, like 10 years ago, no way that was happening in the Catholic Church. Now it's widely accepted of like, oh yeah,
yeah,
they had to come out and say, oh, we're sorry. But then when new pedophilia things come up around politicians, people are like, no, I think it's just conspiracy. It's like, dude, the Catholic Church, which is debatably more powerful, was just doing this. Like,
yeah,
how
yeah.
why is it that we can see it happen here, but we still want to dismiss it over here?
Yeah, and I think too, kind of with your platform and what you're doing, it's like I've gone down and showed like evidence and evidence and evidence every time in those conversations. It never went anywhere. They never looked at anything. They just accused, right? And so there was no benefit to that conversation. And so if we want to post, I think if we're doing it as influencers, and knowing who to engage with, just if they're open to that type of conversation, because it's the other people that you're going to wake up and not that person. And if you can't post anything in a free and democratic world, right, then we're in China. And I lived in China, and it's not a place you want to live. Overall, as far as the freedoms go, they don't have YouTube, they don't have Facebook. They took Buddhism, and I just came from meditating in Nepal, learning Buddhism from traditional Tibetan monks, to talking about Buddhism with them. And it was a totally different thing. They were afraid to talk about politics. They were afraid to talk about religion. That's how tight their conditioning was. And that's not a world that, I really want to adopt. I want to speak up for freedom. I want to speak up for truth and integrity, and be aware of kind of what's going on here. And I'm open to being wrong. And I hope, I'm probably wrong a lot, but I really want to have these open dialogues without really attacking one another. But that's exactly right. Why I bet you a lot of people don't post, because if you go into it with any of them, they don't it's not about finding the truth. It's more about protecting their view, and they'll get mad. And I've lost a couple friends sadly over this, and ones I wouldn't expect. And it was sad, and it's kind of hurtful and challenging. But I feel like we're in a time in the world that we need to kind of speak up for what's right and really pay attention to what is going on, and say, all right, let's pay attention to what's going on, but what is the highest narrative? How can we use this to respond in a way on a global scale that's never been seen before? Because we don't need a government. We don't need anybody outside of us other than cooperations of the citizens of planet Earth, or the free and living people, because I could definitely go down some rabbit holes of what I've learned over the years about citizens and admiralty law and your birth certificate being a friggin' shipping container receipt, and all that shit's real too, man. And it's like, what? It's, it's so crazy. So what is necessary is us imagining these things, imagining a better world, deciding who we are as individuals, because the people that you want to talk to, you're the guy I want on my team. I know I could tell you something that's completely opposed. Mike, your name is not Mike. What the hell are you talking about? I swear to God, I believe it. Your name is not Mike. And you're like, what are you talking about, man? You know what I mean? But we could still somehow have a conversation and not hate each other and beat
Right.
each other with blunt objects, because that's your character and your integrity. And we need to be able to hold that. Right. Same with religious wars. We need to be able to hold, you have a different God, I have a different God, but I'm not going to stab you because of that. And that's what we're happening over this, over safety. You go out without a mask, you're killing people. And so, we're in very interesting times, but hopefully this is enough for us to wake up to say, who do I want to stand behind? And almost everybody, not everybody, because there's a couple of good people. I hope we're still cool, but most people that kind of said something, they were people that I met in my life that didn't demonstrate integrity, that weren't people that I really wanted to sit around at a dinner table with, and so they kind of exited themselves, but I'm civil to them and tolerant of them, but it wasn't a heavy loss. So it's kind of like dividing itself a little bit, but saying the amount of people that have come and said thank you and given me more information that I could learn and grow about what was happening, that could allow me to make better choices for myself and my family and loved ones, has as much is a much greater degree. There's much more of those people. Said that terribly.
That's okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. What do you one of the things that's become very apparent to everybody, I think it's apparent to everybody. Like, you and I have been familiar with the fact that Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, they've been censoring for a while. And every once in a while, someone will get kicked off, and it's usually someone who they are extreme in their views, and they get kicked off. And I don't like seeing that, even if I disagree with that person, or I think their view is like extreme in a direction that's not in line with what I'm thinking. But I mean, the censorship that's happening right now is crazy. Have you seen what Brian Rose is doing with creating a new platform for those who are getting banned? I mean, how many YouTube videos, dude? There was YouTube videos and Instagram videos that I watched that I went to share with friends 12 hours later. I couldn't find them. Like I fucking saved them. They were in a feed. I went into like a message feed to find it. It was gone. It wasn't just censored. It was like it was never there. I remember one day it was someone sent me a video on Instagram, and then I watched it. I thought it was interesting. I didn't think the guy was 100% correct, but I was like, this is good. It got me thinking about things differently. It got me thinking about viruses differently. I was like, okay.
Is it Dr. Andy Kaufman?
No.
Okay, because he was on my show and he got banned pretty quick.
I'm trying to remember the guy's name, but I mean, that doesn't matter. Like, doesn't matter who it was. I went to go share it with another friend. I was like, hey, what do you think about this? And I'm looking, and it was like it was never in the message thread. And I go, holy shit, man. They just disappeared that shit. And it was a feed off of YouTube that was then shared on Instagram TV and whatever. What do you think about all the censorship that's happening?
Well, I'll kind of give you the rough overview. People have been asking me to share it for a while, and I'm not the best at it. I would suggest going to Corbett Report. He does great research, all very well documented. Questioning COVID has a lot of scientific research on there. With what you're saying about censorship, it's immediate and it's quick. And that's when you got to start questioning things. Because in China, right, they have, you know, a government that is not a model that I would like for my way of living. And that's what they do over there. They censor anything, and they'll even put you in jail. Now they're talking about contact tracing. So when you follow all of those ships, it is going in a direction that does not seem to be positive, based on something that they're saying was this deadly. Now it's not even close to that deadly. But then I've kind of looked at some stuff in the future about the second wave and things like that, that they baked into the propaganda cake. It'll probably be worse than the first, because people have been 3 months scared out of their wits. They've successfully crashed the economy. So disease will go up. That's what happens when you put people out of work and you scare the crap out of them and you don't let them go outside. That is literally how you create disease. And so
Everyone's immune system just went down and inflammation went up.
oh, and then they say wear the mask, right? Well, doctors are coming out and say wear the mask. Well, what would happen if I restricted your breathing by, let's say 20%, but let's just say like 90%? Does that sound comfortable? If you can't breathe, like I'm obstructing it 90%, does that sound like you feel safe and secure? Or does that feel like you're dying and you want air? We need fresh air. Our body is made to do this. And there's no study out there that says this thing is incredibly deadly. Yeah. Like as far as like death rates, it's like 98% high or higher. That's a recover from this. You know what I mean? It's way more widespread. It does kill people, but it doesn't justify all of the other things that are happening, right? So why all of a sudden is the World Health Organization doing this? Why is Bill Gates, connected to every single thing? He was friends with Rockefeller. You look at the Rockefeller document of future scenarios, and the vaccination agenda. You look at the UN agenda of 2030, and you read through those documents, and you see what's happening. You start to piece things together, and then all of a sudden, any information that goes against the mainstream narrative, and if you look at Operation Mockingbird, watch Century of Self. The news isn't designed to inform you; it's designed to tell you what's happening, and that's why you need alternative media. I had Joe Martino on the show, and he talked about when alternative media became more
I've heard
powerful.
the news is designed to scare you.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
what I've heard. It's like the more emotional response we can prod you with, the better rate. You'll be glued to the screen. You'll watch the commercials, so
all
on and
that.
so forth. So
Yeah,
it's the news to me is entertainment. It's like if you're not being entertained by the news, turn it off,
yeah,
because it's stories. And I hear people go, "Well, I need to be informed." I'm like, "Well, who is informing you? You are getting one point of view." And I don't even believe my family members when they tell me a story. They're telling me a story. I'm hearing a perspective. I'm hearing their story. It's like, it's not real. It's just a story. They're entertaining me. And
yeah.
so the news is the same way. It's like, if I'm not being entertained, then what am I doing here? I'm buying into a narrative that's being created by somebody else. What is their motivation? I don't fucking know, but it probably has nothing to do with my well-being.
Yep. Yep. That's 100% correct. And when you look at it and you look at the history of it, it's pretty intense. Like, because I studied hypnosis, language patterns, NLP, things like that. So when I hear language patterns in the news, and I see language patterns written in the media, like one example I saw in Canada was 150 million people could die of the coronavirus, right? That immediately scares the crap out of you. Just like if I said, don't imagine a pink unicorn flying around, or don't imagine the American flag, or don't think about, purple sparkly hippopotamus with
Oh
wings,
man, that's a good one.
right? So you can do
I saw
that, right?
all of it.
Yeah. So you can do that in the negative fashion. And when you do it in the negative fashion, what it does, it creates fear without you. You didn't tell your body to get afraid. Your body just got afraid. So it works. And psychological manipulation really works. And again, please watch Century of Self. You will really get a firm handle on this, because it's actually being used against us. And for me, I want to
Well,
liberate.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really want to know what humans are capable of. And it really is mind, body, spirit. And when we synchronize those things, we're capable of anything. People like Wim Hof, people who have done great things in history, and what we are capable of together. But it requires us to be in a state of liberation, of community, of compassion. Because if we're afraid of everyone, if they think they're going to kill us, if they think our neighbors are going to turn us in because we're saying hi to our neighbor, that is not a community cooperative thing. We are incredibly powerful beings, and we need to upgrade this civilization together. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. There's I'm not remembering his name right now. He's I want to say he's a British guy. He's a mentalist.
Darren
Um,
Brown.
Darren Brown. Go watch his shit on Netflix because that's a prime example of everyone thinks that they have this sovereign mind, and it's not true. And he does a really good job of demonstrating how easy it is to either manipulate people into doing things, or to he did one exercise where he basically was able to figure out what people in the crowd were thinking or words that they had written down, and it's all based off of things that had popped up in the news in the last few weeks. And so what is dictating our behavior, we think we're making choices, and it's not true. We're not making choices. We're heavily influenced. And there has been, and you started getting into this a bit, there have been organizations that are in charge of things that are centuries and centuries old, right? They have been practicing influence. I mean, we call it influence manipulation. It's the same thing. It's like, and influence is like the really nice way of like, I'm an influencer, or I influence through my marketing. It's like, yeah, I'm encouraging people to take action, and I'm encouraged, that's influence. Where do you cross the line of manipulation? I think that's very subjective from person to person. I think the general population has also, there's this group standard of like, okay, you just crossed into manipulation. But here's the thing, I've been studying marketing for a decade, and you've been studying language and influence, and for I don't know how long you've been studying this stuff.
I don't know. Most of my life.
Your whole life. So like, I mean, but I also read when I was 15, one of the books I loved reading the most was The Prince by Machiavelli, and which is all about manipulation and influence over a population. So, and that was written in that was for a Prussian prince, I think. So I don't know, hundreds of years ago. I don't remember the dates on all that shit, but like basically, there are organizations that this information has been passed down century after century on how to maintain control and influence over mass amounts of people. I've been at this for 10 years. I got interested, I've been interested in like influence for a while, but the last 10 years, I've really got a handle on marketing, language, all these things. And I'm going, holy shit. This is what I learned in 10 years. This has been passed down for centuries inside of the ability to control the masses and influence is just probably mind-boggling to us, things that we can't understand.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And all of this is very documented, and what we're experiencing right now is a classic, because if you look at governments, they've always governed the people, they've controlled the people. And just find a bunch of times in history when the government was like, holy crap, they just did a great job. It's pretty rare. What's happened is you've had genocides, even the last, we just in Canada and North America, we just did a genocide of the Native American culture and their spirituality within the last 50. We finished it off in the 50 years with the school system. What happened in the school systems is horrendous. Most people don't know about that. What happened in the school systems is horrendous. It's absolutely unbelievable. And so, working with some of the Native American elders that I know and learning about what they went through and how.
Well, what was happening?
Oh, do you not know about school systems?
What school systems?
The Native American public school
No,
systems? Oh
no,
God.
no,
Okay.
no.
Well, I'll give you a brief overview. Basically, they created public schools for Native Americans. They took children from their homes. They did. My friend Brian Francis did a documentary on it, and he was on my podcast, and we talked about it. I said, "Well, Brian, like, what did they do?" He said, "They did every terrible thing you could imagine." and lots of it. So they had kids in cages. There was rape. There was torture. There was every single thing you could imagine en masse. And they were taking them from their homes to their family. And this happened for years and years. And the last public school in Canada closed down in like 1995 or something. And so this is so recent, right? When was black rights? That wasn't that long ago. When was women's rights? That's not that long ago. So, we need to understand that the power structures, these ancient power structures that exist, but really have no power of us. That's the one thing I want to say is like, yeah, it's a dark thing. It's like, oh, conspiracy, all this kind of stuff. Yes, there are small groups of people that have a lot of influence that design things that are really not for our benefit. That's kind of true. But all of that goes away when we start cooperating. All of it goes away when we start cooperating, when we get past fear, when we're able to kind of see a bigger picture. And one of the ancient tools is problem, reaction, solution. What's happening now? The virus is going to kill 150 million people. Everything's shut down. Oh, wait, it's not as bad as it was. Oh, there's this other thing. And here's the solution. The solution is vaccines. Bill Gates has told us we don't go back to a regular world until the whole entire population is vaccinated. Then you get a vaccine ID card, and then you get, increased surveillance and less liberties. And that's all a good thing. Maybe it is. Maybe he's trying to help. I don't know. But it doesn't seem positive in what I'm looking at anyway. And I can't remember. I wanted to say something else, but do you want to add in that? I can't remember what I was going to say.
No, I don't know.
It had to do when you were talking about Machiavelli. I can't remember.
Yeah.
It'll come to me later. But yeah,
Yeah.
so the bottom line is there are things out there. We need to question what's going on, understand how old this system is, but just start questioning and allow
Yeah.
people to have opposing views and start to work together because we're in unprecedented times. That's for sure.
Yeah, I want to point out that you and I are likely in different positions and than the average person. And sometimes when I bring stuff up, people uh uh it's a frustrating thing that people say to me, which is like either, oh, are you afraid that something's going to happen to you, or like the projection is, oh, Mike is worried about himself in this situation. And I'm sitting here going, look, if I'm speaking up, I'm actually not worried about me at all. I'm not actually worried about anyone taking away my freedoms or whatever. Because I know I'm fine. There is what I what I do know is uh if you're very adaptable and you have your own sovereignty, right? Like you could put me in a cage and I'm still gonna be happy, right? I might be frustrated with some things, but I might have some moments, no doubt about that. But like I'm still gonna find my inner peace. I'm still gonna have that. So in my own internal state, I'm in a relationship with myself. There's something going on there that is very satisfying. Um, that you can take away a lot of external things, and I'm still like, I'm great. And I also understand, I really understand how the world works well enough to climb the ladder. Like I know that like the rules don't apply to everybody the same. Like if you don't know what to do or what to say or how to be in certain situations, yeah, you're going to get screwed over. Like you just don't know. And when I'm not, like I said, I'm worried about people who don't know what to say, who don't make enough money, who live in certain areas of the world. That's what I'm worried about. Me, I'm great. Things could get a lot worse and I'm still going to be fine. I'm not really worried about like ever going broke. And even if my bank account went to zero, I'd still eat. Like there's just all these things where I like to remind people, it's like, I'm not really worried about me that much. When I am concerned about people losing liberty and all this stuff, like Like we could go completely communist and probably figure out a way to join the Communist Party and like make the most of it, like try to change it from the inside out. Or I'm not doing
You're
that, people. I'm like, I'm
you're gonna
super
have a
far from
party.
that.
You're gonna have a party anywhere. There's nothing shaking you, man. That's
Yeah, I'm gonna figure it out. Whatever world you put me in, I'm gonna figure it out. So I'm not worried about it. So like when if I'm expressing something, it's because I'm legitimately concerned for other people.
Mm.
Like, I'm not worried that someone's gonna come knock on my door and take me away. That's not my concern. But I do know that's happening with other people.
Oh man, well, I'm probably going to be one of those first friggin' people out the window. When you're talking about censorship, it's happening so rapidly, and that's what I wanted to touch on. I forgot, but I made a playlist. Most of those videos are gone, and it's literally just information from people who are good people in the world. They censored Bruce Lipton. Do you know who Bruce Lipton is? He's the sweetest son of a gun ever. Talking about
Bruce Lipton is uh, a lot of our clients, we give them Bruce Lipton to listen to
oh
some
yeah,
audios from Bruce Lipton before they do in Training Camp for the Soul to get people to understand like this is how things work. This is how the human experience develops. This is what causes us to think certain things. This is what causes us to like do certain things.
yeah, and
The
so
guy's genius.
He's genius. And so, they censor Dr. Rashid Buttar. He's on there with Bruce Lipton, had to re-upload. And so they've kept re-uploading. So he's still out there. But that's when you look at everything as a whole and you're saying, look, something doesn't pass the smell test. Something is happening here. And again, I don't think it needs to be a bad thing. I hear a lot about this global awakening, right? You've heard about this, the ascension and all those kind of great things. What I think it is like owning our own integrity and what we're going to do and what's happening, right? Can we maintain our integrity and begin to imagine how are we going to react to this? Because you've probably seen this in your life too, where somebody will have a very negative experience in their life, but they'll say, you know what, that's what catapulted me into a life that I loved, right? I hated my life. I didn't even realize that I got super sick and then I became this. And this is that catalyst for humanity to get really pressed down. But a lot of people, they don't want to look, they don't want to look, they don't want to look. But if you look, what's happening is very documented, it's very overt, it's very globalist, it is not good. It's agendas that I read about in my 20s, and I was depressed for a while because I was like, there's no way this could be this bad. Like I said, you look at the Rockefeller document, look at Corbett, look at questioningcovid.com, start looking at all this kind of stuff with the numbers. None of them say we should have lockdown. What's going to happen for real is at least 30% of small businesses in Canada, US are out the window. Lots of disease is going to go up. There's going to be starvation from food shortage. I'm pretty sure, and I don't know for sure, but these are my guesses. I'm pretty sure the food line should have been essential. That's just my opinion. Food line should have been essential. So it's like this created thing. Now, when it happens, how are we going to adapt? How are we going to continue to adapt? But that will give, the agenda that's written, and it's written in, again, a few documents, but it's cashless society, forced vaccinations, ID chips. All of it doesn't look good. Maybe that is good. Maybe that's the positive way of the future. I don't know. It doesn't seem good from my view. But what I think is as it clamps down, we're going to have a reaction to kind of, all right, let's band together and figure this out, because that's not what we want. What is it that we want? We want liberties, we want freedom, we want good citizens, good communities, good societies, and we have all the resources. We have all the we don't need fake money to do any of this. We have all the resources. We have enough good people in this world to create peace and a beautiful society.
Yeah. One of the things you're hitting on that I've been in contemplation about is I was concerned. Like I started seeing all the things that could go wrong based on this pandemic, whatever you want to call it. Like, what are all the impacts? And food supply is something that was on my radar very early on. And I was like, man, I just don't know enough about the food supply system to know if it's safe or not. And so I started making my own mental preparations of, okay, say I can't get meat at the store anymore. What's my move? Okay, I need to be somewhere near where I can hunt. I need a big freezer. Like, these are, really simple, basic considerations. There's also some other ones I made and conversations I've had with people. to make sure that me and my loved ones are in a good spot. But now as I started studying the food supply, I'm going, oh, this might be 6 months down the road. This might be 12 months down the road. And when we started shutting things down, it was like hit the gas, hit the brakes, hit the gas, hit the brakes. Because Americans are typically very rebellious compared to other countries, right? If you look at,
We're not doing nothing, man. We're not.
but
What?
what I'm witnessing, what I'm looking at is I think the government has created this quarantine situation at the speed at which people will digest it. So I think they're monitoring, going, stay at home, shut it down, and like, oh, they're going along with it. Okay, we can push a little harder. Oh, they're going along with it. We can push a little harder. And so if it went from one day it was this way, and then the next day was like what it might be in 2 years, then people are going to be like, what the fuck, and freak out and throw the shackles off, right? But if it slowly drips in, all right, this quarter, it's COVID-19. Next quarter, housing market. quarter four of 2020, food supply. Getting your meat is going to be tough to get, and getting your soy burger is going to be impossible because most of it came from China. But you get all these things just start happening one at a time, and it's slow, so it's digestible by the average human. So then you have a group of people who assume to be free, oh, we have this very free country, but it just gets eroded little by little by little by little. And one day you wake up and someone's knocking on your door trying to put a chip in your neck. So, but by that time it's fucking normal because we don't leave the house anymore. We do all this other stuff. I don't know. I'm very I'm watching the speed at which things get rolled out, and I'm going pretty methodical. You don't change everything at once. And when there is chaos, that is a great time to implement change. So what changes are being put in that we're not even paying attention to?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And what you're addressing, I've looked at quite a bit, and what I perceive to be the agenda that's written down in many places is not a positive one. Even like Bill Gates talking about vaccinating the whole planet, which would be insane. But Robert Kennedy Jr. and a lot of other people there's a lot of evidence that's saying this isn't the way that we want to go. And vaccines aren't proven 100% safe. It's kind of ludicrous when you start looking at
safe
how a
or
vaccine,
effective. It's like,
yeah, safe or effective. Like the strains modify you know what I mean? It's just all this madness when you look into it. And I'm a terrible person to kind of explain it in detail because I'll read a 300-page book and I'll summarize it in a sentence. I'm like, it means this, you know what I mean? This book means probably don't trust the government.
Yeah,
you know I mean?
I get a little funny about the vaccine conversation because like the moment people think that I'm an anti-vaxxer, I'm like, whoa. Not opposed to vaccines. It's just that's not where my attention's at. Like that's not the best way to boost my immune system. But everyone wants to point out like polio and just a very small amount of virus-related disease that vaccines have had an impact on reducing, right? But then there's like all these other things, these other viruses where we've created vaccines that haven't worked at all. But everyone likes to focus in on just a handful of diseases that were like, oh, we were able to like accomplish this. And it's like, yeah, we also started washing our hands and stopped, and after we wipe our ass before we eat food. Like there's a reason. It's not just the vaccines. There's a plethora of things we put in place, plumbing, things like that made certain viruses reduce. But so it's only a part of the solution. But at the same time, how many vaccines have been created that, like, I don't know how many, almost everyone I know that gets a flu vaccine every year gets the fucking flu.
Yep.
Doesn't seem like it's like working that well, but people want to like believe it,
Yeah, and that's a really important topic that you're bringing up. And going down these rabbit holes, I realized that germ theory is just a theory, and it's not, they haven't proven a virus. And I am saying these words, and I'll give you brief references. Dr. Bear Paul Lando does a presentation on germ theory versus terrain theory. I didn't even know that that was a thing, but I'll summarize it the best I can and fact checked everything because my brain is going through a lot of information. But there's a guy named Bouchamp versus Pasteur. And Pasteur wasn't even a doctor, he was a chemist. Bouchamp was a doctor with 4 degrees, highly intelligent, and he was promoting terrain theory, saying the terrain is everything. The microbe is nothing. It's all about the terrain. Meaning, if you're growing a vegetable garden, it's about the soil and the microbes and the viruses and all those little tiny things in there to grow the vegetable. So it's your body. How strong is it? You know what I mean? Are you getting sunlight? Are you healthy? Or are you 300 pounds? You only eat chips and pop. You're sick and you're destroying the body. So now that germ forms within the body as a result. And then there's virus theory versus exosome theory. They can't really distinguish the two of them. Again, I'm not a doctor. Look at smarter people talking about this, but this is the gist of what I'm getting. And so Bruce Lipton talks about that.
Well, didn't Pasteur at the end of his life take back some of
Yeah.
what he had promoted?
Yeah, and so apparently is at the time of Napoleon, but again, so then you keep going a little bit. So again, how to control the people. You move a little bit further up. It's the Rockefeller Institute that basically demonizes anything holistic, any kind of holistic practice. You're talking about your Ayurvedic medicine, anything from the Chinese culture, any common sense like exercise, you know what I mean? Healthy diet. And I've interviewed several guests on my podcast that had cancer and talked to many more who did it in real life. And it was the same thing. They cleaned up their diet. They reduced stress immensely. They took all the stress out of their life. They got into a vocation that they enjoyed, and they had exercise. That's how they were able to, heal themselves of cancer. Those are
Yeah.
all super important things. But germ theory says there's something floating outside of you that's going to get you and then kill you. Well, I'm not concerned about it because I trust my body. And I've also made peace with the fact that my life is not permanent. Those are two important factors. But the main thing is saying it's more about the terrain. And so if you look at germ theory versus terrain theory, go to Alpha Vedic on YouTube, watch that whole thing, because it's, again, these lies that we don't question. We don't question authority and the people in the white coat. We don't question the blue line. And some police officers are now making videos saying, hey guys, what are you doing? Right. This is, we're here to protect the, Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms. What is yours? Declaration of Independence or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But all these things we don't question. And so the Rockefeller Institute, when they demonized all the holistic medicine, it went to vaccines and pharmaceuticals. How much power do those industries have? And how much money would they stand to make if the whole world were vaccinated? Those are interests that need to be considered when legislation is moving forward, especially when there's continuous propaganda and talk about forced vaccinations. If you want to go for a vaccination, all the power to you. When you start talking about forced, then now we're having an issue, and there's something else probably, afoot here.
What do you think what's different about the Western mind? There's obviously a Western mind thing that likes to separate things out. Whereas you look at a lot of the Eastern traditions, Ayurveda, you look at a lot of Chinese medicine, it's very holistic in its approach. And if you look at American doctors, North American doctors who are very holistic in their approach, a lot of them are looking at these Eastern philosophies and being able to do it. Bringing a Western mind into this conversation, I think that's the basis of, like, our entire culture is based on the way that we're thinking about things, and we're very good at dividing things up. If you look at our scientific method right now, is you have to reduce the variables in order to study something. And people hit me up with, well, is fish oil good? I'm like, good for what? And it's like we want to isolate something and then know that it's good for this one thing. And not, and if you look at any pharmaceutical drug and you look at the fucking all the stuff that happens, it's like, oh, this will clear out your sinuses, but you're going to get diarrhea. You might be dizzy, confused, and you might piss yourself or go blind. And it's like, well, cool. Well, it's gonna fix. It works. It fucking works. It's like, it works on what? What are you talking about here? So like, I think when I start thinking about this, is like, it's the Western mind that loves to divide this up and can't see the connection between all things. Whereas you look at these ancient medicines, and it's obvious to them. I've even gone to South America, and it's like, I'm hanging out in the jungle, and they go, it's like, oh, I've got this thing, and they go, oh, here's a plant, and by the way, it's gonna upgrade you in like these 10 other ways as well. Like, it's gonna help you with that, and then it's also gonna make this better, this better, and this better. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. I have that issue too. I didn't even connect it. So yeah, I went off on some rant, but
Well, those are all fantastic points, because really it comes down to, I think, the humanity of the individual and our own biology and the own power of our bodies. Our bodies are absolutely extraordinary. They are amazing, just the most incredible things ever. And, these outside influences, they can be great. Modern medicine is great. You know what I mean? At the right time and place, it is a great thing. If I break my arm, I want a doctor to give me all the drugs, fix it up, pop out brand new.
yeah,
We'll get it done. There's a time and place. But when there becomes profit, pharmaceuticals, vaccines, agendas, then we got to start looking at things in a little bit of a different way. So, Dr. Kelly Brogan was on my podcast again, super brilliant. And she was in psychiatry, and she learned about all the pharmaceuticals, things like that. And she would prescribe them all, right? And over the years, she wasn't getting the results she wanted. She started studying some other things and was able to get results using theories from more terrain medicine, from psychology, from just understanding the root of the illness, more of the Eastern philosophies, and getting better results. She wanted to help people. And then she started to question everything that she learned, going back in the documents, what is the research that says these work? Where does that come from? And just questioning everything. And so you talked a little bit about isolating things. I just listened to a podcast with a German doctor, and he just talked about how, viruses and studies are very inconclusive, because everything works with everything else. If you separate it, it's not going to work the same way. Like, if you separate the finger from my body, the finger doesn't just start working independently as itself over here, right? I've lost the connection to the hand, right? You take the arm off or whatever. And so that's what's happening on a cellular world as well. And what we're forgetting from this, and that's why I really love the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton, Dr. Joe Dispenza. I don't know if Walter Russell said this or Dr. Bear said it, but consciousness directed is the most powerful force in the universe. And I love that quote. And if you look at Dr. Bruce Lipton, Dr. Joe Dispenza, these ancient teachings, it says that you have the ability to heal yourself, that your mind and your body are extraordinary, and people have done it. And it puts all the power back on the individual. If we put all the power outside of ourselves, we need the vaccine as a savior. And it's almost like we need Bill Gates as the savior. Why is he the worldwide health expert right now? It doesn't make any sense, right?
Microsoft, duh.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, right? And you got to question that, right? And then what are the words coming out of his mouth? Vaccinate everybody. Then we go back to normal. What are the institutions creating this in place, and what are their agendas for that? Does sheltering in place mean that we should do all of this other stuff and wipe out, create, what is it in the States now? A couple 100 million are on unemployment. And this is design. This is real. That's a real effect that's happening.
Yeah.
And so once the data comes in, we need to upgrade what we're doing here. But humanity in the body has survived viruses for thousands of years. And even the polio stuff, when I went and started to research that, there's a lot of evidence that there was herd immunity at that time as well. But you'd have to look at the full documentaries from people that know a lot more than I do, explaining it in detail. And you're like, oh, interesting. I never knew that. So, and you look at the conditions in their life, right? If they were all being like, terribly depressed, working tons of hours, Dr. Andy Kaufman talks about it. And there was something in the environment at that time, and it would wipe out a certain amount of people. And so when we look at, we just have to question everything and really take the time to research it. But at the end of the day, I think that the most important thing is our own empowerment, our own conscious directive, our own intention, even prayer at this time, like your own spiritual practice is like, who do I want to be here? No matter how bad it gets, who do I want to be? Like Muhammad Ali didn't want to go and shoot people in Vietnam because it went away. It wasn't who he wanted to be. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that's not the person that I want to be. I'll defend my family and my right to free speech to the best of my ability, but I'm going to do my best to maintain integrity, speak my truth, try to share useful information, and advocate for peace, for open discourse, for kindness, for truth. And anytime you share some stuff, people give you shit, they're not advocating for that. And I would just say, don't share what you want to share, open those things up, because I think influencers need to try to figure it out. But I know what you're talking about, because I went through 2 weeks of just wasting my time
Yeah.
on one person being a total bummer or whatever they're doing. But they're not interested in that. So just completely ignore it and put it out there and say, guys, let's work together here. Let's be aware, because there's another quote that says, it's something like evil can only succeed when good men do nothing. And I feel
Yeah.
like there's going to be a time here where we got to like kind of look at it and just, hey, this is where we stand. This is what we stand for.
Yeah. Can you comment? You said the words back to normal. Can you comment on my experience? I've had an experience of certain people that are using that language of like, I just can't wait till it gets back to normal. And I find that those people are the same people who like want a vaccine and like there's going to be they think that there's a single solution. Like the virus came from a single place. There's a single problem, single solution. There's this isolation mentality again. Can you make any comments on getting back to normal?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. It's funny because that's what the propaganda is in the newspaper, in the news. It's the new normal, quote unquote. And we only get back to the new normal, quote unquote, when we get a vaccine. That's what's in all the papers. Let's just, all right. But, you look at the World Health Organization, right? Guess who they do that event, right? They do the event for their little thing and their concert with Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga is friends with Abramovic. What's her name? Marina Abramovic. That's what it is. Known Satanist occultist with spirit cooking. Google Marina Abramovic spirit cooking. It is disturbing as heck. She's connected to all this other stuff and pedophilia and Pizzagate and all that kind of stuff. So the World Health Organization picks that individual. Now, just for you as the strong coach, okay? And you're thinking, you know what? I'm gonna get Matt Belair to do a concert and represent me. And then you look up and it's like Matt Belair spirit cooking, and I'm eating people, like these dinner parties where I'm eating people. Literally, this I'm not making this up. This actually exists. And do this crazy satanic art. You can be like, oh, nah, he's just expressing himself. Don't worry about it, dude. Come represent my brand, bro. You wouldn't do that because it would be ridiculous. And that's not what you want to represent your brand, So
No.
that's who the World Health Organization has chosen. And you look at those things and you piece it all together. And so these are the people creating this agenda. And that's why, there was a court case in the US that said basically the news can legally lie to you. And when we understand that, we need to disconnect from that mainstream media, because they're using it as a brainwash device. And again, Century of Self will document all of this for you. Operation Mockingbird will document all of this for you. It actually exists. It's actually a thing. And so that's why there's two things that are really, really important. Number one, meditation and your own guidance. You have to do that. Going out in nature and take care of your body and knowing what thoughts are coming from you and what's coming from influence. And so Darren Brown does great work on that, where he'll get people to pick in a toy store where you could pick anything. He gets them to pick the thing that he wants through subliminal messages. Well, the media knows how to use that. Marketing knows how to use that, but you use it for good. You're using marketing and subliminal messages because you're saying, hey man, come on over to the Strong Coach. We're gonna make you healthy, right? We're gonna take care of that body. We're gonna give you a positive internal dialogue and connection with yourself and your own empowerment. Come on in. It's nice here. And you're doing it for night. You're doing it for a good reason. You're like, get over here. You can do it, man. Yeah, I trust in you.
Yeah.
And so, but you can use it for opposing purposes as well. And so It's very important that we understand what's going on so we can separate fact from fiction, understand propaganda, and how these work. Like a double bind is, another technique that they use is like, would you like your vaccine on Sunday, or would 2 weeks from now be better? It's like you're getting the vaccine. And when you hear these things and you become aware of these vaccines, you can kind of step outside of it. And now you have freedom of choice. And that's what we need here. We need freedom of choice, and we need to come together as a humanity to imagine the highest possible narrative coming out of this that we create, not that somebody imposes on us, that we create, free from fear. You know what I mean? Like you kind of addressed it. You said, I'm going to be fine. Can we be fine with nothing and build a paradise together so we don't need more to take from someone else? You know what I mean? To reimagine our world based on ethics, values, cooperation, kindness, compassion, and tolerance.
I think we'll end it there, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on today's show. Where can people find more of you?
Well, thanks so much for having me, man. Thank you for your work. It's always a privilege to speak with you. Definitely, if you're not already a part of any of Mike's world, get in there with the strong coach and anything he's doing, because, if it's apocalyptic, man, I hope you're near me. No matter what happens, it'll just be fun. If I can get down to California, man, I'll do it with you. But
well, I'm not in California anymore.
Oh,
so, yeah.
You get yourself a bow and arrow, and what's that flap called when you have a G string and a flap? Is there a name for that?
Oh yeah, it's a it's a well shit, now it's escaping me. Loincloth. It's a loincloth.
Yes, that's how I imagine. You're gonna be totally fine, bro. You're gonna be in the perfect seated squat, you know what I mean, and just wrestle down a buffalo.
You might be remembering me that way, because I've been I'm pretty sure we've been in each other's presence while I'm wearing just a loincloth. So
yeah, absolutely.
Jungle life, folks. Jungle life.
Yeah, you're gonna be fine, dude. Well, if people want to find out more, go ahead.
I got out of California, man. It was like when California was cool until the apocalypse hit, and I'm like, not so cool anymore.
Yeah,
not so cool anymore. Like way too much suppression there.
Know where I would go, man? I'd go to Houston or like somewhere outside of Texas. Texas is the safest place in the world right now. And it's funny for me being a Canadian, because I was younger and I was like, nobody needs guns. You know what I mean? And then I like Texans. I was like, they're like the worst. You know what I mean? And I like, actually, you know what? Texans are the best. And I didn't realize that guns were to defend yourself against the mother effing government, And so, the U.S. needs to win this. You guys need to come together for the whole world to show what's up when the government tries to overstep their bounds.
I'm doing Nevada, which is debatably more free than Texas. I mean, because you can get so we have prostitution.
That's how you start.
Weed's legal. We got prostitution, weed, and guns. Like, it's kind of seems like the freest state in the nation at this point. So
yeah, Nevada likes to go big too. Yeah, right. Big trucks, big guns.
That's true.
Just freedom, just human freedom. And so we'll see how this plays out. But I know that they have the second wave baked in the cake. And actually, shoot, this is what I wanted to say. What I'm concerned about. Have you done jujitsu at all?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you know how they say like white belt is 1 move ahead, blue is 2, brown is 3, black's 4 or 5 or whatever. Same in chess. When you first learn chess, you go 1 move ahead, 2 moves ahead, 3 moves ahead, things like that. Yeah. This global elite that's been around forever, they're probably 9 moves ahead. So even if we get through this and this and this, that's what makes me concerned, right? So I'm hoping, they're like, oh, well, then the second wave, and then they'll do this. It'll always get a little bit incrementally closer. And I've already seen agenda for, when the second wave happens, they're going to blame it on people like me for speaking out, these doctors for speaking out, the people going for the freedoms. Now people are really going to die. And what are we going to say? And so I've actually seen that plan laid out. And I was like, if they execute that plan, it's just going to work perfectly. So I'm like, it's not good.
Thanks for all the hope, Matt.
Yeah. Please. So, but the hope is, and this is the thing, I do believe that there's a spiritual force here that transcends all of it. Our consciousness in this grid that we're all connected to, this benevolent force. When we go to sleep, we don't have to worry about dying most of the time, unless obviously we have health issues, but your body's going to breathe. and you're going to wake up. We all have that same innate natural cooperative force. And hopefully what's happening in the environment is for you to go back into that, look at yourself, the nature, birds, surrounding, friends, family, even people of opposition have love and compassion and kindness and say, you know what? These are my values. These are my needs. Let's build something amazing together. And if we can click that way, enough of us, not everybody, just enough of us in humanity to make that agreement, we can do something extraordinary. And I think that if you were alive at this time, you came to build a new world, a better world. And it has to start from crumbling down these old paradigms because they were not for everyone. The world that we were in was harming a lot of people. And so we have a huge opportunity to build something much, much better. It was on a foundation of popsicle sticks. Let's build it on, brick and build something glorious, and then something like Atlantean with some cool, free technology and Tesla stuff and all that kind of goodness.
Yeah. I mean, the system was built to benefit a few.
Yeah.
I think if anyone were to debate that, you can't. I mean, you look at history, it was to benefit a few, and then it's gotten that group has gotten bigger. But it's still operating inside of the system where that is the case. So, and what does another system look like? I actually don't know. I don't know, but I think just like anything else, you can't know what it's like or what it looks like until you pass over and cross over to the other side. Where can people find your stuff?
You can check me out, mattbelair.com, Zen Athlete, if you want to go down the mental training rabbit hole. And you'll find everything over there. A lot of the stuff we're talking about the coronavirus, I recommend Corbett Report's really good, and questioningcovid.com is really good. And just get out of fear. You know what I mean? Get out of fear into cooperation and just stay awake. And we got this, man. I have faith in humanity, and I have faith in benevolence and goodness and spirit or God or the universe, however you want to call it. I have hope. So this is an exciting time at the very least.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, bro. Good to see you.